would sew the underarm seams now, but because this bear is quite small, it will be difficult to do the wristbands the way I would on an adult hoodie. And so we're going to attach the ribbing that goes on the wrists right now. So you're going to take this ribbing and fold it in half, wrong sides together. So we're looking at the right side on the ribbing and lining up the notches there. And then I'm going to pin one end, and you can see here that the ribbing is shorter than the sleeve is. And it's meant to be that way. The ribbing's going to snug this in at the wrist. So I'm pinning each side, and then in the middle there's a notch that lines up with the notch on the sleeve. And I'm going to pin that. And when I sew this, I'm going to be stretching so that the bottom is flat. Right now it's bigger, right? So when I sew, I will stretch that so it's flat. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. And at the machine, we're regular stitch length, 2.5, 2.6. Again, lining up with the 1.5 on the machine. We're going to back stitch. And then I want my needle down, taking out the first pin, and I'm going to stretch so that the sleeve underneath is flat, and I'm going to continue stitching 1.5 from the edge. Now at the notch, you don't jog out where the notch is. It's just to line things up. You keep sewing straight. So I'm sewing up to the pin. Take that pin out. Now I'm stretching to the end here. And again, keeping it lined up on 1.5. And back stitching at the end. Cut your threads. So you can see it kind of pulls up a little bit because of the stretch that we just put in there. And then you do the same with the other side. And then at the serger, again, we're going to trim a little bit off, and we are going to stretch as we sew, as we did at the machine. And again, you can trim those serger threads right off. Press it like it was sewn. And then press it towards the sleeve. And I'm just using the tip of the iron again. I don't want to press wrinkles into the garment. Now again, optional, extra for experts. I'm going to do the same stitching here about 3 millimeters away from the seam that I did on the edge of the hood earlier. Now you want the hood inside out, and we are going to pin the underarm seam starting all the way from the sleeve. So you want to line up the edges here and pin. You want where your ribbing is should line up evenly there, where the seam of the ribbing connects to the garment. At the sleeve, these also should line up. And you want to look at the direction that these are facing, and I'm going to make sure this one here is the same direction as the one at the top is, and I'm checking both sides for that. And then it should line up at the bottom. And again, if you cut it out accurately and if you've sewn all the seams accurately, that should come together. And then do the same on the opposite side. And now you're going to sew this. I'm going to start at the bottom of the shirt and sew towards the sleeve. Normal stitching, 2.5, length 1.5 centimeters from the edge, back stitch, and cut your threads. And the same on the other side. Then you're going to serge these, and again I'm going to cut a little bit off. You can snip the serger threads on the bottom of the shirt, but at the wrist we need to secure these ones. So because it is close to an opening, I'm going to weave my serger threads rather than tie a knot. So I'm using a larger hole needle. This is a darning needle or a crewel needle. And just feed that on, and then you just run it underneath the serger threads for a couple centimeters, pull it through, and trim the end off, and do that on both sides. We're getting ready to do the ribbing on the bottom of the hoodie. And so to start with, you take your waist piece, fold it in half, right sides together, and we're going to stitch the short end. This is stitched 1.5 centimeters from the edge. And again, it's regular stitching, back stitch, then you're going to press this as it was sewn. This mark here I made to show the wrong side of the fabric. That's going to disappear. And we are going to press it open. Now I don't want to press creases on each side here, so I'm just pressing in the middle to press this so that I have a circle. So you take this circle that you sewed and you're folding it in half with the wrong sides together. And I'm going to put a couple pins in it. So line up the seam with one, and the hoodie's right side out. So I'm going to put this around the bottom of the hoodie. I'm going to line up the seam on the side here, and I'm going to push that seam towards the back of the hoodie. And on the opposite side, there's a notch there. That's to line up with the seam on the opposite side. And again, I'm pushing the hoodie seam towards the back of the hoodie. And then again, you see that the ribbing is smaller than the shirt. So I'm going to stretch it a little bit. And this sometimes is easier to do with a friend. but I'm stretching it, and when it's stretched, I'm grabbing towards the middle and I'm pinning in the middle, and then stretching it again, and I'm going to pin in between each of those pins. And then as I sew this, I will be stretching as I did on the wrist earlier. So again, to the back, stretch from the two sides, I grab towards the middle, pin that, stretch again, pin in between, and stretch and pin, and that's ready to sew. So again, regular stitching on the machine, length is 2.5. I'm going to be sewing 1.5 from the edge. I'm starting at a side seam, so I'm going to get that in place, doesn't matter which side. Lining up on the 1.5. And back stitching. And then I'm going to stretch a little bit to the first pin here and sew up to there. And then stretching again, sewing to the next pin. This one's at center front. Then I'm going to stretch to the next pin. Stretching to the next one at the side seam. And continue around. And snipping threads when you're done. At the serger, we're going to serge around this, but it's a circle. So I have to angle, so I'm going to start at the just behind the one of the side seams, and you have to angle on and once it starts to cut the fabric, I'm going to straighten it out. And again, I'm cutting off about 3 millimeters. And you want to go slowly and make sure you're only cutting the edge of the seam allowance and nothing else. Now I'm coming up to where I started, so I'm going to overlap, and then I'm going to sew off. And now this is a time when I'm not going to be sewing this again, so I'm going to tie this one. You could weave it as well, but it's on the inside of the garment, so it won't be seen. So I'm just doing a knot there, and I will trim the thread end off of that. So the seam is pressed towards the body of the hoodie, and I'm not demonstrating that for this video, but you've seen pressing before. And now again, extra for experts, optional, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to do that row of top stitching 3 millimeters from the edge, just to keep the seam up towards the hood and to give a better finish, a nicer looking finish on the edges. So again, I'm going to start close to the side seam and back stitch. And I have the hoodie inside out so I can see this so I don't accidentally sew it all together. And as I go around, I'll be adjusting so that I'm sewing where I want to, so I can see exactly where I'm sewing. So seam right there. So I don't have any cord here at home today, so I'm going to use a piece of ribbon. I may replace it with something else later, but you can use a shoelace as well. And so you can use a bodkin to put this in, which is a little gadget that you thread this through. And again, I don't have a bodkin here at home, so I'm going to use a safety pin. So you just safety pin the end, goes in the buttonhole, and then you just feed the ribbon through the casing and out the other buttonhole. And you can tie a knot in the ends of your cord or your ribbon. You can also buy little ends, I believe, that you can put on them, similar to what might be on a hoodie that you buy. And there's your finished hoodie, ready for the bear.